Hey, what's up everyone? Sean here, and welcome to another new video. Now, I wanted to make a video that would kind of, in my opinion, encompass and again, somewhat reflect on what I feel is like the last 25 years of tech. So we're in 2026, and the first iPhone, first smartphone came out in 2007. So I'm going even back further. I'm gonna go back to the year 2000. So roughly 25, 26 years of technology, of just consumer technology, I should say. And again, this list is just things that for me, it's kind of like stuff that I think are what changed the world a little bit, and for me personally, and I'll even put a context on it because I've worked in right previously. I worked in retail, from my teenage years, like 16, 17 years old, all the way through my late 20s, and I worked primarily in tech. So Best Buy, Apple Store, many times in Best Buy different stores. And so I sold, and I even worked in like retail for wireless chains and things like that, different carriers. So I was really in or part of like the entire consumer technology explosion of innovation, and all these companies like Samsung and Apple and Google even, and everyone else coming out with all these crazy things at the time. And I've seen them all evolve, and it's part of why I kind of even started this channel, is because it's to partially show my deep appreciation for what they've all done for the last 25 years or so, and to also just to enjoy it and to reflect on it a lot too, and that's why I enjoy these videos too. But today I wanted to make that video and just kind of showcase. I chose five things. So five things that, in my opinion, for me personally, that I saw both working in these different jobs. I'm not going to say what job it is, but or what jobs they were. But five things that when I was working these jobs at different places and doing different things and selling different things, that I saw different companies introduce and how they kind of exploded overnight, or just became a really like a new thing that ended up becoming like just changing the tech world a little bit, like just honing it more and just changing overall. And these are not in any kind of order of time or anything like that, but just things that I think are cool. Now, this list is just my list. So what I'd love for you guys to do watching this video is to give me your list of five things that have you think that have changed the tech world in your opinion in the comments below, and why. Because I think it'd be fun to see everyone's different opinions about what's changed tech in the last 25 years or so, because it's really been around that time frame where we've gone from again the first smartphone and seen the evolution of everything across the board overall. So the first thing I wanted to choose is VR, so virtual reality. And I'm gonna give like small little stories along the way too. So in my opinion, VR, virtual reality, is one of the biggest things that's kind of come and gone. Now it's been around longer than that too, overall, from different aspects. But the first time that I personally experienced it or saw it was when Samsung. I think I was I'll say where I was working. I was working at Best Buy. I was working in the mobile industry, in the mobile Best Buy mobile area. So I was selling phones, but we had a Samsung rep at my store, and they would always come around, and they also worked there full time too. And they always came around to our area to tell us and introduce us to the newest, latest and greatest stuff of from Samsung, and what it did, and just to have knowledge about it, and so we could offer it as a reason to sell the phone, essentially, was the idea for me, at least for my job, for mobile. And I remember one day when our Samsung rep came over, and it was when, I don't know which one it was, but it was some Samsung, I think it was a Galaxy, but it was when they first introduced and I don't remember what the name of it was, but the first VR for Samsung. And at that time, they had it situated where you'd have to put your Samsung phone into the actual like goggles essentially, and you had been put on your head, and there was apps that were, and there was not that many back then. I'm not sure if that's changed or not over time. I've never looked at it since then, obviously, for my own, just because I don't care that much anymore. But it's just when it came out, and when I was introduced to it, you strapped your phone in there very tightly into the Samsung goggles, and then you put it on your head, and it was like right here. It was like right on your, because I tried them out, and it was right here on your face essentially. And there was about four or five apps at that time that were ready, primed and ready and optimized for that VR experience, and it was cool. It was intense, but it was also like, because it was right here. I'm like that's, to me it wasn't the best experience of that kind of sort. It was cool because like the one that I used was like it put you into a kind of like a, almost like an avatar world in a way, where like you were put in this like really massive kind of fantasy world that had no story, but you were just able to walk through it. And pretty much see this massive world. And even the Samsung right didn't like really have a name for the app or what it was for, but he's like, yeah, well, it's in its testing phase, but we are selling these goggles as a at that time addition to the phone and blah blah blah, and it was cool for what it was. And since then, obviously there's been many other variations by different brands. You know, Google Glass, which I never even used before, or whatever. And even now, I think for for Apple Vision Pro is the thing. It's a very overpriced, overexpensive thing for what it does, in my opinion. But it is still VR. And so even though I don't think that VR in general is really useful to anyone personally, and that's just me, it still has overall had a pretty, you know, it's impacted tech. It has. I mean, there's things that are because none of these companies have ever really let it go. And what I mean by that is they've always like kind of made new versions of this stuff or made like at least introduced a new product with VR, with the idea of VR being a thing. And again, many different companies have made them, and just the one that I'm most familiar with now would be the Apple Vision Pro because of how it works and how expensive it is and what it does and how it works with your software and the ecosystem, all that kind of stuff. So VR to me is one of the very, you know, not super prominent, but it still exists and it's still being created and used by people, and it's more of like a fancy gadget to me than anything else. Not really a day-to-day use kind of thing for me. I'd never buy one for the price. So maybe someday in the future, Apple will make a budget quote unquote version of the Apple Vision Pro or something like that, and I can afford to maybe buy one if I just want to burn money and see what it's like. So that's the first thing I want to mention. Now the next one is going to be for a product is going to be headphones. Now, if you remember back in the day, and this is way before the whole Beats by Dre acquisition to Apple. Now, initially, I remember we had. I mean, there's always been high-end headsets. I'm not talking about those. There's always been like audiophiles who, listen like audiophiles who swear by like really nice headphones that are open ear where you can use them in the studio. Like, I'm not talking about those. I'm also not talking about the ones that use in the studio, like the Sony ones that a lot of people use, like a lot of DJs use, or even like a lot of Audio Technica ones where it's like there's no like mobile controls on them or anything like that. None. I'm not. Those are good headphones in their own right and in their own aspect, but I'm not talking about those in any way. I'm talking about like the major boom, in my opinion, that happened when we went from having the earbuds that all of the smartphones came with back in the day when the first smartphones came out. They came with earbuds, and then Beats by Dre pretty much reset or set a new standard for what a colored headphone was back then. And if you're unaware of what that term is, colored headphones are literally the exact opposite of what Audio Technica and Sennheiser and all those specialty audio brands and even Sony ones back in like the studio monitor ones. But colored headphones are the exact opposite sound profile of those. And I don't want to get too geeky about it because I used to produce music too and I know all about them. But basically the emphasis of colored headphones is the idea that the headphones are already heavily engineered and integrated to have more bass, more high ends for audio or high ends for more vocal parts, and the primary maker of those at the time when the explosion happened was Beats by Dre. Now there's been many versions of these headphones, and now they're of course have been they've been acquired by Apple, and now they have their own stuff too, which I'll get to in a minute. But the original ones that I remember, that I didn't buy them myself because they were way overpriced, and they still are. And I didn't have the money back then. But the original ones were made by they were Beats by Dre, but the cords, the cables were made by Monster Cable, and if you remember back then, and I don't know what year it was, but they were known for being the highest quality, or sold as the highest quality, I should say, cables in the industry of like, and they made HDMI cables and other things like that. So Monster Cables was known for other stuff, but they partnered with Beats back then with the first few iterations of headphones, for like the studio and the solo and the pros to make those headphones, the cables at least, be the best that they could be. And when those came out, because they had a pretty big list of like a series of different versions, and they all really range. They had in-ear ones too, I remember, but they all range from like $100 up to like $600 or $500, whatever it was, for the top end Beats Pro. And then there was, of course, there was always like special edition ones which were like $1,000, and like Fendi ones which were like way more expensive and all that kind of stuff. But that lineup of Monster Cable and Beats by Dre, like the combination of them, kind of in my opinion reset the market. And again, they were the first colored headphones that I had ever used or tried out. And I didn't buy them because they were overpriced and whatever. But they emphasized the idea of a closed back, very bass heavy, active noise canceling in most cases for the studio ones. And what else was there? There was again bass heavy, pretty good audio overall, like as far as like highs go, and but they also broke quite a bit. Like, I remember there was like a lot of drama around the headphones themselves, not the cables, but the headphones themselves, where like the actual like the headbands would snap sometimes, and the ones I did own later on were the actual the mixers, the MIXR, the mixers, because not because David Guetta designed them, but because back then I was a pretty big fanboy of Skrillex, the DJ and producer, because of what he did and when he had his own boom too, musically speaking, for dubstep. And in many videos, he was seen doing or using the mixers as his DJ headphones, and I bought them, and they were like twice as loud as as a normal sound profile because of the fact that they were made for DJing. But the rad thing about them was that they had the swivel ear cups on them because, again, for DJing, you wanted to have the option to swivel your one side of your headphone to be able to hear mixing live, and then also have your other side with the headphone on. And they were good headphones. Like they were the strongest metal lined headphone I think I've ever used ever before, and they sounded really good. The cable was super strong and solid. So again, there was many different iterations, and I went through a whole headphone phase once they got redesigned a few times. So I went through a whole headphone phase of buying like the mixers in white and black and red, and they were really cool, and they had all these colors. So again, the to keep it simple, again, the Beats by Dre before the acquisition to Apple really set the tone, in my opinion, the standard for a very long time of how good music could sound in your headphones. And again, I'm not knocking in any way like Sennheiser or Bowers and Wilkins or Audio Technica. No, those are all super solid headphones. They've been around forever and ever, and they're kind of their own standard for profile. I mean, that they have a very neutral, most cases neutral sound profile, so you hear more of what the studio was recording. And again, Beats by Dre was always known for heavy bass and that kind of thing. But they did reset the market for what they were price wise, and people bought them. And then of course, whatever year it was, Apple ended up buying or acquiring Beats by Dre, and then now they kind of don't do much with them anymore, as far as I'm aware. And now Apple themselves have the highly sold AirPods Max, which I also own, and those are insanely good. They are kind of like the business version, I would say, if you want to call it that, or the classy version of what Beats by Dre was. But Beats by Dre never really went to that kind of style of like all silver and classy looking and more of like a business kind of thing overall. And then there's also Bose headphones too. There's so many brands back then, but the idea and the point I'm making again is that there was a huge headphone boom, that as soon as smartphones like the iPhone came out, that Bluetooth and good cables and good sound quality became a thing, and those headphones exploded everywhere overall. So that's one thing that was a really big thing that was back then on just how they were sold. And even counterfeit ones were a huge drama deal back then too, for like counterfeits. Beats by Dre headphones too, so a lot of it was also in that aspect too. Now the third one I want to go into is going to be for smartphones in general. So, and that's an obvious one, but I still wanted to include it because it's a very obvious that before the iPhone, we did have the BlackBerry, so RIM, which is who made that. We also had the Palm Treo, I think it was. So there was smartphones that existed, so handheld, good phones overall that worked, that were smart, relatively speaking, for what they were before the iPhone, but simply nothing at all really ever did what the iPhone did until the iPhone did it. So, and then of course, as soon as the iPhone came out, then Android launched itself on the Google, I think the G1 phone, I think if I'm not mistaken, was the first one, which was from T-Mobile, like a T-Mobile exclusive back then. And I mean, there was like the Sidekick ID or Sidekick whatever it was from T-Mobile as well, and that had its own market too, and I even had that phone too. But for the smartphone we know now, that's app stores, or like that has the app store, the cameras, and literally I used this, the iPhone to record my videos on. Nothing really was there before the iPhone, and the iPhone set the standard or reset the standard for what a phone could be. And of course, we've had now 18 iterations, whatever it's been, 18 iterations of the iPhone itself, and who knows how many of Android phones across the world of different manufacturers and different software versions. So, but again, the smartphone itself, completely broke the market, reset it, and things like that, and made it what it is today. So that's definitely a huge thing too for that kind of industry as well. Now the other one, this might be a weird one to pick out, but it still did change things quite a bit. And as far as I'm concerned, when I saw it being sold a lot, which was drones. Now drones have been around for a long time too. I'm not sure exactly when the first one was ever created or anything like that, or when it was commercialized for consumer usage. But as soon as, and I'll back up a little bit. There was a point in time with when vlogging and YouTube started. I would say it was really more when YouTube became more of like, it had its kind of like vloggy boom where a ton of vloggers started to make YouTube channels, and it became a thing. It became a thing soon after, where once vloggers started doing YouTube, and then the whole YouTube Partner Program was introduced, whatever year that was. That whole entire thing, that thing became a thing. I'll put it that way. And what I mean by that is essentially is where all these really heavy photographers, like they were, and it was a mixture of really videographers, photographers, and a mixture of them between, where they started to make daily vlog, or not daily, but vlogs about their travel experiences. I'll put it that way, to put it simple. And they would fly everywhere around the world to do their photography jobs or filmmaking jobs, and they would vlog the experience on really, really at that time expensive. I mean, they're still expensive, but really expensive, like Sony cameras, and Canon cameras and everything else in between. And this is before the DJI Osmo Pocket came out at all, which redefined again what a vlog could be for what it is now. But back then it was really all the DSLRs and mirrorless cameras that did it. But again, YouTube was a thing. And then I remember seeing an evolution happen when a lot of those YouTubers started to get these overhead shots for film. And I don't know what year it was, I can't remember that, but I remember like just seeing an evolution on YouTube where I saw a lot of really beautiful, gorgeous over Earth, like hovering over the Earth shots, and I was like, how do they film that? And then I started to see these drones show up at Best Buy, like a Best Buy store and Target, where they were very, very small drones. They were still expensive. Like at least in my opinion, they were expensive, of like, $200-$400 for whatever they were, and it was made by DJI and other companies too. But they would be like super, like the size of like my microphone case. I mean, bigger than this, but this size, and they would expand out, and then they could fly a couple miles away in some cases, and then they had really terrible battery life, but they would film in the highest quality, usually HD or 4K, whatever it was at that time. And I remember seeing that style of filming becoming way, way more popular, almost it felt like an overnight thing, and it really wasn't. It was probably a few months or a few years. But I saw this really quick evolution where a lot of vloggers on YouTube, like a lot of travel ones especially, where they would have like the daily, not, or again, I keep saying daily, not daily, but they would have these vlogs where they would film everything on their handhelds, their really expensive DSLR cameras, and then they would then go to a really cool place, like a really, typically like somewhere in Europe or wherever, or anywhere in the world really, but just somewhere else that was more exotic, and they would send the drone up, and then you'd see these really gorgeous, beautiful overhead shots that were way up in the air. And again, I was like, how did they get these shots? And then I realized that it was from drones, the whole drone thing. And I remember for a long time at Best Buy, when I worked at Best Buy, that the drone, and there was any version of them, that they were one of the most sold products that we had, because people wanted to use them for not just vlogging, but just for anything from real estate to YouTube of different stuff, and just people wanting to film things where they just couldn't get to physically, and that kind of thing. And it was still like a, I would say it was still had its own boom as far as like sales and being everywhere across YouTube, especially for filming. It wasn't as heavy of an impact as maybe headphones, like commercialization wise. Sorry, outside window. But they still had had an effect. And even to this day, like if you watch any vlogger at all, then if they go anywhere at all, they usually have at least 1 or 2 or 50 drone shots in their videos, and it really does enhance the videos quite a bit to have their video be broken up between walk along shots and talking head shots, and then having this gorgeous overhead footage. So again, drones were a huge thing. They still are, and they've gotten way, way smaller, and craziness. And I think to tie it in a little bit too, is that I will give credit, because DJI, to tie it into vlogging a little bit, because that changed the world to where we are now, the impact wise, is that once the whoever DJI decided on this is a genius, but I remember when DJI, someone there, when they decided to take the camera from their drone and put it onto a handheld and then launched the DJI Osmo Pocket, whatever version it was. That was a genius move too, because they're the most popular now non-mirrorless camera for the pricing point that they are at. Now I will say that I mean, they film in 4K and all the highest quality of whatever you want to call it, but the sensor still sucks. It's still just a generic 1-inch sensor, I believe it is, and the battery life is okay and that kind of thing. So it's not the greatest thing in the world, but for the pricing point of not having to go out and spend, you know, upwards of $3,000-4,000 on a nice freaking Sony camera or a Canon camera or Nikon, whatever it might be, which are rack up expense. You know, they're really, really, really expensive, but they're good. They're that cost for a reason. So I think the DJI Osmo Pocket, whatever version you get, is a very, very solid intro camera for what it does. And it kind of gets people, it kind of graduates people from an iPhone, for example, or filming on a smartphone to getting into a more handheld standalone camera. I mean the Osmo Pocket 3 or the current one has like its own problems with as far as like the sensor and having to put like, you know, like lenses over it and all that kind of stuff. But still, it did impact, you know, filming overall. And the last one I'm going to go through as far as impact ones for the last 25 years is going to be what I called, and what it was called back then originally when it came out is actually for machine to machine. Now, machine to machine as a phrase was told to me or introduced to me when I worked at a Verizon store by one of our business reps, essentially. And the idea at that time, because it didn't exist yet, is the fact that machine-to-machine technology is a thing where you go on your smartphone or tablet or just any machine that's a smart device, essentially, and you basically control or monitor or manage another device. Now, these days we call it an app. So, literally, it's the same thing as when you go on your iPhone and you go to your DoorDash app or whatever else that controls another thing, and even if it's a service, whatever, and then it brings something to you. So if you go on DoorDash on your phone, order food or Starbucks, whatever it is, and then someone else gets the order, go to the store for you and pick it up and bring it to you. That's machine to machine, technically speaking, and that's what it was called back in the day. So when I remember in 2008, roughly, it was right after the first iPhone came out, when the App Store didn't exist yet, but it was called machine to machine back then. And again, it was interesting to me. It was introduced to me as a smartphone controlled or smart device controlled system where your device would talk to another smart device and then it would do a service. I mean, the business rep talked to me like as far as like more of like on like a small business level. So like he was talking about like farmers and agriculture and other way heavier, way bigger, broader aspect things. But nowadays it's just an app store where you can go on there, go call an Uber or order an Uber, I should say, or order movie tickets, and all that is technically machine to machine. Back in the day, that's what it was called. At least to me, it was. So to me, those are, and there's many, 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 many more huge, massive human impact things that have happened or been invented or been created in the last 25 years, like the smartwatch, which started as fitness trackers by Fitbit and other companies, things like that. And then I wanted to add that in there into the list, but to me, I think that the other ones are a little bit more fun to talk about, essentially, but on their own. So I'm gonna keep it at that list for now. I might do another video in the future on these because I think there's a lot of fun to talk about on how they impacted like technology and human beings and how we interact with each other and all those things. But for me, those were the big 5 things that I saw that came out in the last 25 years overall, where again, like I saw so many of them get sold, so many new things came from them, so many new technologies and new things of technology like stemmed from them and evolved again and again and again. And it was just rad and really cool to see all that happen while I was working in these stores in my 20s and in my teenage years too. And another reason why I wanted to make this video is because I've seen a lot of that stuff slow down a lot. Like I haven't seen nearly as much evolution or innovation in the last 5 or 10 years since all those things have been invented. And I don't know the reason why that's a thing anymore. Maybe it's because all these companies that used to make those products are more software based now, or they're trying to do more with AI, and whatever the reason is. I'm not really sure. But I feel like that there's been a definite plateau of tech innovation after all that kind of stuff was invented and evolved to where it is now. So in the comments below. As always, let me know what you think about what's your list again, like what things, like what 5 or 10 or 20 things that you think had a huge impact on humanity for technology in the last 25 years or so, and tell me why. I want to know why. But otherwise, if you enjoyed the video, of course, give it a thumbs up, and of course, subscribe for more content on technology and how it affects us. Thanks for watching as always, and I will see you all in the next video.